And you just gave me sort of the perfect sort of starting point. While you were talking, I made an example because you will need it. And I think that's. Let me see. There is something perfect. Okay, so what you see here is, I think you have to do a pitch tomorrow, obviously. And I show you one example, and then once we have looked at this example, we basically dissect what I did. Okay, I typed into ChatGPT for elevator pitch are done to make investors interested. That's even agrammatical, but it doesn't matter. So I just, and then it gives me an answer. I don't care about that answer, okay? Because sort of it says, assessment, and I have even not read the answer. And then basically I look for a random web page, like here. 14 elevator pitches to inspire your own. I did not read it. I copied it. And I'm just throwing it into, basically I ask, is this example good? And just basically copy the text in, ignoring what's in there. And then ChatGPT gives me an answer, why is this good? I don't care. Now we come to the interesting point. Can you give me an example for a pitch for a startup that does automate patent research and link it automatically to research paper? It's implemented as a web page and we have already a working prototype. And now that's the part where I'm interested in. So hello, and it's sort of very similar to sort of obviously for a real one taking what ChatGPT is, it's a good starting point. And I think this is what we talk about usually. It's basically if there is something which you could do by yourself because you have learned how to do it, you can incredibly speed up what you do. If you have no idea what you're doing, it's like jumping into murky waters. You have no idea what's coming out. So basically, if you can look at it and figure out if this is good or not, then it saves a lot of time. If you cannot tell, good luck. So don't use it. So I think if you sleep now, from now on, if you take this away, that's sort of the main thing. It's incredible to speed up your work for things you could do. And I think this is sort of also from a societal perspective, the most tricky part, because you are now a generation that has, for example, learned how to code, how to write, how to sort of analyze things. So for you, it's really easy to use ChatGPT or whatever language model you want. For the next generation, that basically we have now first-year students, oh, I don't need to code because I can just create a code. Sort of, yes, but you cannot tell whether it works or not. And so I think this is the main thing at the moment. I think with current LLMs, we have sort of an incredible chance of saving time when we work, but it does not help if you're stupid. And stupid even in a part. And so basically, after now have listened to this talk, generating something like this was really a good thing. If you would have not listened to the talk and generating it, you may be somewhere in murky waters. Okay, so this was sort of the first thing. But you have seen what I've done here, and this is sort of combining a few things where I go now into a more theoretical side of it. Now, let me see. I've got a few talks here. I think I take this one. And let me do this. Okay, I think we talked about prompt engineering, and I think I find this a bit boring. So, because I think there is sort of a lot written, and people, even top universities, make semester-long courses about it. I think it's there's a lot of common sense to prompt engineering. I think the first thing is, if you have not looked into how LLMs work, doesn't matter what background you have, try to get an understanding of what it is. And I think we had recently a winter school, and Paul Lukowitz, one of the directors here, was giving, and he was giving a talk on the magic of matrix multiplications. In the end, it's matrix multiplications. And you're in a big space, and I think what we need to find, basically, a lot of the things we do is really, in this big vector space, we want to be in the right place. And this is sort of some of the tricks. Now, what do? I think you've probably heard of 0-1 few-shot prompting. We start with this. Then we go a bit into sort of how does prompting look like. We then look sort of how we can refine prompts. Can they self-refine or can they refine themselves? How do we do iterative creation, then chain of thoughts, just a few things that have been published over the last years. And when you look at them, they're sort of not really rocket science. And even some of those papers are cited 4,000 times. That's quite interesting. So, pity that we didn't have the idea to write it down. Okay, so zero-shot prompting, and I think it's what we find still, a lot of students who have used it for a while are still in this model. You basically open ChatGPT and you ask for something like, translate English to French, cheese. Any French speakers? I know there are French speakers.
Fromage.
Fromage. And I think this will work. And this is sort of this zero shot. Basically, there is no context, you ask something, you get an answer. This is usually not working. It's working for something like this, but if you have sort of more serious things, it's not really working. Because it's lacking context. Imagine you go to a person at the railway station in Tokyo who happens to speak English, and you ask a question. That's basically zero-shot questioning. There is no joint context whatsoever. So you go up to a person and you ask the person something. And usually that doesn't work. Okay, so that's where a one-shot prompting comes in. So basically you say, please do something for me, translate English to French, and I give you an example, what I have here, and then I give you sort of my question. This already helps a little bit more because you establish some way of context. In this way, the context is really an example. And now, few-shot prompting, what do we expect? Just a few more examples. So what we do is basically we have the task, we give examples we know, and then we ask our questions. And this is not fine-tuning, this is really just basically putting the prompt into the right space. And obviously, the newer the models are, the longer the prompt is you can put in. At the beginning, sort of the early models had just sort of a few tens of tokens they can have. Now we are in the thousands of tokens. So basically you can push a book in. You can push, as I did earlier, you just take a web page, you put it in as examples. An interesting thing is these examples have nothing to do with the solution you ask. They're just examples, but this puts you in the right space. And now, if we take one step back, a large language model like GPT-4 has probably 50 times the number of books the University Library of Munich has in its store. It's a lot of text, like really, really a lot of text. And I think it's about 5 times the Library of Congress, which is basically all English published. So just to give you, and basically there is very little that's not in there, but you don't find it usually. So if you think of Reddit as a whole, if you think of all your favorite chat rooms, it's all in there, but obviously not exactly. And there is one interesting thing, and do you have all a text of yourself, which you have written? For those who have a laptop on, do you have a piece of text which you have written yourself? So pick one piece of text you have written yourself and take 8 words in a row and put quotation marks around it. I do that. I'm also quickly checking if I have something. So go into Google. Let me change this. Okay. Now let's see. Is there something that I've written? So.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Okay, I do it with German. You can do it with.
What is the experiment?
So the experiment, you need and you basically look. I'm just now. So that I take this number of words, and I put them into Google, and you can try it with your own text. So I have now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words, and I put quotation marks around. And exactly how many results do we get? 5, and it's exactly those pages where this text is. And if you have a text which you have written now by yourself, it will be not on the internet. It's amazing, right? And you can typically go down to 6 words, and it's as if you utter 6 words, they are unique. This is amazing, and that's why natural language processing was so hard. If you search for something which starts with a certain prefix, after 6 words you will get 0 results. That's why the big advances with deep learning came. So basically you can...
Does it also work if you use another browser?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
You can basically use any... use a search engine. Have somebody try it with their own text.
Yes.
Have you found something?
No.
No.
And this is basically why plagiarism checks work. This is basically the base technology on plagiarism checks. And it also, interestingly, should work for ChatGPT generated text. I'll do this and then I move back to my... So, okay, multiple, as I say, from multiple databases, but also intelligently linking them. So this is a bit of text that's generated by ChatGPT, and it says no results. So this is original. It's not copied. It's original. It's not. And this is sort of just to keep in mind when we talk about text, the complexity of text is huge. And it's sort of whenever you write something, it's typically new. Okay, so keep this in mind. So just putting out.
I have a question. I don't come from a computer science background at all. But now if you're checking, like comparing this experiment to websites that checks the plagiarism in AI-generated ChatGPT.
They don't work.
They don't work?
They don't work.
Even with the percentages that they show?
They don't work.
Okay.
I think the only person who can tell whether it's generated is OpenAI. So basically, if you go with ChatGPT, OpenAI obviously knows whether you have. They can say Albrecht Schmidt generated this on the 4th of March at 9:47 because they have it in their storage. Nobody else can tell.
Okay.
So obviously there are indicators which may, but I have now talked a lot to students and also pupils, and they said, oh yeah, what we do is we put comma mistakes in, because usually our teachers are not marking us down on leaving commas out, and that basically puts the percentage really down because ChatGPT doesn't make comma mistakes. And if you do a single spelling error, it basically you're completely out of the... So basically the heuristics they have are in my way, I don't really see how you can do it. And we at university, we have talked to our legal people, there's just no way of doing it.
Yeah, and just to comment on that, I recently read a paper where they did experiment, actually where they tried to detect if the text had been written by ChatGPT of humans, and actually it's failed because actually ChatGPT is producing the text which is similar for non-native speakers. So,
and why is
this?
this?
A non-native speaker, I mean,
why is
what we write by hand is very similar what the ChatGPT can say.
And why is it?
It could be then with our natural language what we write, it can be say like assigned as plagiarized, but we actually wrote by ourselves.
And why is it sort of creating a text in the style of a non-native speaker?
Because that's how it's trained. That's what it was trained for.
Because 80% of the internet is
Yep.
basically non-native speakers or bad spelling or. But I think in the end it's sort of that's an interesting one. It basically gets the spelling and the grammar right, but in a very basic way. So I think that's because it averages it out. But I think this is sort of the thing. There is plagiarism for AI. And I'll show you. I think if you do stupid AI stuff, yes. If you do zero shot, create me an essay on X, we can detect this. But I show you that we usually don't do it like this. We do it iteratively, and then you have no chance of seeing it.
What would happen if you put your 8 words in ChatGPT of your CV? If you put the same 8 words of your CV in ChatGPT and ask it to continue?
Very often it says, I'm not giving you personal information, so you have to use something
But
like
it's public domain, right? Your CV.
Yeah, but I think I've recently tried this. I was on the U-Bahn in Munich, going to TU Munich for a PhD defense, late like always, and then I asked ChatGPT, what is the address of Klaus Bengler? He's a colleague in design or in industrial design, and it says, oh, I cannot give you sort of personal details of Klaus Bengler. And then I basically got a few times around and said, oh, where is his chair at the university? And then I got the address. And so basically there may be something, but it probably, I think we tried and then I speed up. So
No, we take all the time.
But I think it's really, it's now this, let me check. I have ChatGPT 4 open here, and what I do is I create a new thing that we have. Okay. Now let's.
You want to share it?
Okay. I think that's a brilliant idea. Okay, and then blah blah blah. And I've used it to do short CVs of myself before.
Mm-hmm.
And now let's see if I can take. Do I have somewhere an English version? Take a bit more, then we see how it goes. It's completely wrong.
Yeah? So there's a small point to be made, because people are talking about LLMs replacing traditional search engines, right?
No, I think that's exactly the wrong use. So, but I think it has some information in there which is not completely wrong. Basically, what are sort of basically it's a probability-based distribution, right? What is sort of the typical thing after what I did before? What would make sense?
Joining MIT.
Joining MIT would not be, and I would have, for example, I would have been at MIT 2020 if the pandemic would not have happened. So
it's a good counterfactual narrative.
So I think it's an interesting part, and I think that's why I will not go into retrieval augmented large language models, because that's where we are going. Basically, you don't generate the answer; you generate questions that go into databases. That's basically where we are at the moment with most of the things. We would go into databases and then rewrite things. But I think this is in a way, and I think the completion of sentences has been, that was in earlier versions much better.
Okay.
Because, and then people sued or claimed to sue OpenAI for basically infringing copyright. So the standard completion of sentences has sort of been reduced. At least this is my field. But it's not a search engine. I think it's creating text, and that's what I showed earlier. It's creating original text that's not on the internet.
Right.
Okay, so let's go back to the more interesting parts of bronze.
So many people tell me that I've heard of it, and I'm making everything to Google search before the husband.
Okay, so there is a interesting prompt instruction a cheat sheet, and basically it gives you a bit of a way how to generally build something. And this is sort of the hands-on one for probably tomorrow and tonight. So basically, the first thing is you think of creating a bot persona. So when I'm talking to ChatGPT, it's like this random person on Tokyo Station. They have, I don't know who they are, they have no. So I tell the person in that way, you act now like, define a behavior. It's basically, in this idea, go to example. So act as a sensitive elderly psychologist, as a patient support staff, as a professional journalist, as a car in love with its driver, whatever. Sort of, we did this in other contexts. So basically, you give it a personality, and usually the personality is not just one sentence. And you can get again sort of ChatGPT to help you generate the personality you want to give it. That's what we learned later. But I think the first thing is you have to define a personality. And then basically, so act as a helpful AI is not really helpful. So you really build something, you build, like, I'm not sure, who of you has implemented a game in their life? A few game developers. So, but I think if you build a game, if you build an NPC, I think that's sort of it, I find is really exciting. If you think what your non-player character is like, that's what you do here. You build really, what is your counterpart? And the one is, basically, let's say you want to have an AI that's in the car talking to the driver. What should it be? Should it be a car that's talking to you? Should it be a friend? Should it be sort of a secretary-style information provider, a concierge service? So it's really, you define at that point. And this is basically the first part of your prompt. Who is it we are talking to? Okay? Clear how to do that? Because we have to do it later. And then you have a user persona. And I love that. I'm very often for the German Research Foundation as a reviewer in big research projects. I'm on one of those panels. And sort of about 10% of the things I go to is computer science, and 90% is whatever. And very often I ask ChatGPT, here's the abstract that's public, because other things he would not put in there. Here is the abstract, explain it to a 12-year-old. And I usually get that part. So again, sort of, to whom do you explain it? Again, sort of, this is sort of, just imagine the Tokyo Station. The person will talk very different to a European, to a child, to an elderly person. So you will basically, because the context I have, if I know the person sitting in, and you could go all the way that you define a persona of yourself or your user, or you could even have multiple personas. So you really define the persona the system is talking to. So you say it's a high school educated person who did a vocational training, who loves to do football, whatever. So because then analogies will be taken out of that field. So really try to be on this side. So as much as you put in effort in your non-player character, in like the system, you put in defining who the person is. And the better you know who the person is, and obviously then you could switch this between people. So let's say you have different modes. You detect female, certain age, certain education, and you would basically say, that's how I answer to that person, and then kid, that education, that language skills, and you answer it. Okay, then the verb is basically sort of, yeah, it's not please answer, because the model always responds. It doesn't make sense. So basically it's something, what do I want? Explain it to me, summarize it, translate it, sort of extend it, ideate around it. And again, sort of going back, it's not intelligent. What does it mean? If I say ideate on, let's take the example from the beginning, ideate on what I could do different in a pitch. I get something else. What does ideate mean? Ideate will basically drift us in this space to things where people perhaps in a forum have discussed, oh, I have seen 100 pitches, they're all the same. Who has ideas how I can make them different? And with the ideate, it may steer my answer into that space.
Speaking about the persona and also using the verbs, the reason behind hallucinations in the large language models. For example, I asked ChatGPT why ChatGPT gets hallucinations. He said, I do not get
It doesn't
hallucinations, only humans. And then when I asked him why LLMs, large language models, get hallucinations, then he started to explain.
But in the end, it's I think I don't like the term personally. I think it's it's anthropomorphizing the thing. Basically, what it does, it's underspecified. If you basically underspecify, basically it's again Tokyo Station. You ask somebody something, they have no context, and you say, "Oh, can you say me 500 words about it?" So basically, if somebody approaches you and says, "Yeah, how do you think about blah?" And you have no context whatsoever, it's underspecified, and then you just and you're forced to give sort of an answer, then obviously you will talk rubbish. And so I think this underspecification is the issue. And I mean, most of the things in prompt engineering we see is solving the underspecification. But it's not a search engine, and so people who ask specific questions, they get a generated answer. And that's, I think, basically, it's a bit like, I have in another slide set, I have basically tools to put a nail into the wall. And I think most of us have probably used something else than a hammer to put a nail in the wall. But we all know it doesn't really work. So the hammer is really the right tool. So a search engine is something very different. At the same time, a lot of tasks we do in a search engine does not require a search engine. And I think this is sort of, and I think that's why Google is in my view, in a bit of panic, because a lot of the search business is going away, because that's a lot of the business is not search. It's basically people need some information, and they may care where it comes from, but very often not.
You said that we can fix the hallucinations by increasing the specification, but sometimes when people ask for sources, it made up sources, right? Like,
yeah,
so like then it gave like a strong prompt like this, do this, and it's false.
But I think the sources are again sort of when you look at the sources generated, what's really nice is these sources could be it has names that exist in the space, and they are completely made up. It makes up. If you ask for even quotes of politicians, we did this. It makes up really good quotes of politicians, and they could have been said. Mm-hmm. You can try out with basically put a bit of Biden in and a bit of Trump, whatever you like, and I think the thing is because it looks for things that are probable in that space. So, but what you see now, I think this is sort of where we go with these retrieval augmentation. So what you do is, and now there are quite a number of tools, and I think in the current version 4 it's already in. I say, give me references for X. Yeah. And then it does generate 10 queries to, for example, PubMed, like the medical database. Then it goes with the different, so basically I say, give me for this illness. And then it generates good questions. Mm-hmm. And those questions go into the database, and the answers come out of the database. That's how we use it nowadays. I think the idea of asking, because what do you expect? And it's not a hallucination. It's basically, it's a logical. So and then what you find then for certain areas, you find the highest cited authors' names somehow sprinkled in that field, because obviously it's the most probable name in that, and also that in the titles there are the most probable words in there. But I think it's really just not understanding what a language model does when people do that, and then you can expect that it's sort of wrong, but it's not wrong in the sense of what a language model. The language model shows quite power by doing that, but it's obviously the things don't exist.
Isn't it a very strong statement to say it's not hallucination, it's under specification of the task? That implies that there is a monotonic function that says the more I specify, the more likely I get the right results. Yes. But that's not the case. Even if you super specify, it can still generate rubbish.
It can generate wrong answers, but it's basically, I think that what I don't like is sort of the term hallucination, because I think that's sort of it's in the medical field.
Which one would you choose?
I think it generates the most likely answer, but maybe not the correct answer.
Okay, so the most likely counterfactual, you would say.
And I think what you would do, I think that also how we teach to use it, basically, I have a question, I can use ChatGPT to give me an answer, then I take the answer, which is a guess, and I validate the answer with a search and if I have the right thing. And I think you see now some of the newer ones, basically you have an answer, you have a question, it gives you an answer, and it gives you references. And that's usually, and I think of, I think you probably know from math, one proof methodology, which is usually the fastest one, is you have a problem, you guess the answer, and you check if it's right. So this is very theoretical in a way, but if you can check, basically if you can guess well, and now assume you basically, and I think that's, again, sort of with the multi-shot, it's not just there. So let's say you put a question in, you put different contexts in, you generate 100 answers, and you go with the 100 answers back into database and check which one is right. Those things are the things we see now in research.
It sounds like Karl Popper's model of falsifiability, right? You generate a hypothesis and then you say it's true or false. So
yeah,
it's
and I think you don't have now talked to people. It's not just one. If you have a lot of money, you generate 1 million hypotheses.
Right. That's a tree of thoughts that was missing in your list. There is a paper after the chain of thoughts called tree of thoughts.
Yeah, I've got this in there.
Ah, it is? Oh, yeah.
Okay, so let's move on here. So you have the verb, basically, translate to, extract, whatever. Be specific, and that pushes you in the right place. And then basically the output format. What do you want? Do you want a list of steps, an equation, Python code, JSON, a recipe? And basically this with the output, this could be output in the sense of formatting, like HTML, CSS, whatever, sort of, you can specify that, markdown language, we see this later, or and, you could do both, and say in what way you want to have it. Do I want to have a recipe, do this, do this, do this? Do I want to have like a sort of, like very verbose text? So you can really specify this, and this gets you there, and you get different outputs for that. And then you typically want to say how long the output is.
This doesn't work.
It works pretty well if you do it right, but not all the time. So basically, up to 3 sentences, 10 examples, and so on. It may not count it exactly right. It may be sort of a few words off, maybe double the size, but you get sort of roughly where you want to be. And I think sort of if you're unspecific again, it's not working well. And now let's say, yeah, the tonality, I like that. We have played around when we were in the winter school. We played around with different characters, and if you think of characters that are on their way in Reddit, just pick a cool one. And I think so. I think we built a bot that was a bot that helps you cooking, which has a combined personality of Gordon Ramsay and who was the other one? Jamie Oliver. And we basically filled it with quotes from both of them. And we made the bot also put in, because Jamie Oliver has his own cooking line, to basically put into each recipe a bit of sales pitch. And I think if you don't know Gordon Ramsay, he is really sort of, he is not nice to people usually. And we put his 100 favorite quote in there, and I think it became a really interesting bot you could talk to for recipes. So and it was basically, and again, sort of once you build these personalities, you cannot just say make it Gordon Ramsay, but if you say Gordon Ramsay and you put 100 top quotes in there, it pushes into the right direction. Okay, so that could be sort of. And I think those friendly, neutral, smart, they are too generic. I think you would be much stronger here. And I think here, if you basically like and then a certain person, then you get sort of more in a certain style. Now we're nearly through with that one. And then you could say what happens with edge cases. Basically, if the user gets aggressive, toxic, whatever, you do this and that. That's just sort of a bit, and there it becomes tricky, because edge cases you will not think of many of them. And then you typically also have basically whitelist, blacklisting things, like where you say, if the user asks about suicide, just give the helpline, don't engage further, or things like this. So you could do basically things like this. So to whitelist and blacklist certain points. So I think this is something you can later also have a look if you have time, or you can basically also do it in your afterwards. So let's look into a few more of the things that have been published over the last year. So one is basically this idea of refining or iterative refining with feedback, and there's one paper which I like, it's called Self-Refine, and I have usually the references are on the side, and they are all, the PDFs are on archive from those authors. And many of these authors are from OpenAI. So this is sort of in a way, because they have earlier access to the models than everybody else, that's why they have the papers on Europe's on those things. I think what the idea here is, you have a question, and you ask the question to the model like ChatGPT, and what do? Basically, you ask the question, you get some feedback, you put the feedback into the model, you refine the question, and so on. So you go basically back and forth, and I show you one made-up example. So one of the things is, let's say we have some source code, let's say Python code, whatever. So the task is improve, you want to improve your source code. So you could basically throw the source code in and say, improve it. Works somehow, but not too great. And something very simple, and you can do, you make as a prompt, make suggestions to improve the following Python code, then you add the code, and then after the code, you repeat, because sort of the attention is usually to things that are not too far back. So you say, just provide suggestions on how to make it faster and safer. Don't suggest specific changes, give me general suggestions. If you do that, it says, oh, you should look into sort of where you have loops, if you can reduce the loops, if you can use recursion instead of loops. So it will come up with a number of things. And then basically we don't read them. That's very similar to what I did earlier. Basically, I then just said improve the code with these suggestions. And obviously this is at the moment very much sort of things we do at ourselves, but it's very clear those things will be in the next version of the models. So I think this is why I think learning prompt engineering, what a lot of people think, it's a transient skill. But everything that's published here, as I said, most of the papers are from OpenAI. So GPT-5 will basically look at, oh, he wants to improve code, she wants to improve code. What do? We don't improve code, we basically go through these mechanisms. So, and that's why we see this really amazing. So basically, within 18 months, it's from not passing an exam for most of the exams to passing most of the exams at a level where humans are not competing. I think we have seen this with the bar exam in the US, and we have seen it with medical exams. So basically from being sort of, as good as a monkey, like random, to above average human performance. And I think these things, but this is something you can use now, but I would guess in a few years that's in there. And I think obviously you can make this, and what you do with this, you basically steer how the model thinks. And I think you would do this with a student as well. Before, if I give you the code, improve it, I would say, oh, let's go through a list of things we could do to improve it. We would discuss them, and you could basically iterate over this a few times. And then when we know what we want to improve, then we apply it. And I think this is one of those things which makes a huge difference. Then the iterative creation, and I call it divide and conquer. That's basically what we see a lot with students. The good ones do that. So basically, you have to write an essay on the topic X, and if you tell the LLM to write you an essay on the topic X, it's not going to work well. Obviously, it will basically write some rubbish. But what you typically have, let's say I should write a topic on security flaws in Python, or let's say most common issues with junior developers with regard to security in Python. That's my topic. So what I do, I want to write an essay on that. What would be relevant aspects I need to take into account? It generates me a list of aspects. And then basically, I would basically perhaps iterate on the aspects, what are sub-aspects, going further there. Then I would say, oh, what is a good structure for such an essay? And it would give me a structure. I may basically restructure it a little bit. And then I would ask for the headings. And then basically I say, oh, just write me some keywords. And I go through section by section, write me the keywords. And then I have the keywords. And then I would say, oh, can you make out of... And I would go basically through the whole thing. And then I would go back to the first section and say, oh, you've given me these keywords. I would copy them out and say, can you basically look at these keywords and write some text for section 1? And because it already knows what is in the rest, in basically the vector that it looks at has already all the keywords for the following sections, then it basically would not duplicate things. If you would basically go and formulate it immediately, it may duplicate stuff. So again, this is something... at the moment we do this manual, but you could imagine that you can write code to do exactly this. And now imagine you basically have this for paper writing. I think we've discussed a lot how much paper writing will be left for students. If you take computer science or empirical sciences, basically once you have defined, I'm doing HCI, once I have built the prototype and defined the study, and run the experiment, can I automate the rest? Is there a value in writing up the paper? And sort of being old school, we think there's a value in writing up the paper, but we may be wrong. So I think there may be just basically, and the beauty is, if we would document all the research we do, we could imagine you can generate a one-pager for people who would just are interested in the result. I could generate a 10-pager that focus on how I carried out a study for somebody who wants to reproduce it. I could create a 5-pager for a popular press magazine, or I could create a dissertation that has this in great detail. Imagine you do your research, you do it well, you document everything that needs to be documented, and the rest you generate. And this is basically, again, sort of, at the moment we do these things manually, but it's very clear systems like Word will have this in the future. So you start writing an essay, and it's not like Clippy, oh, I see you want to write an essay, how can I help you? I think, but this one, and people do it like this. We see that students are doing it. And I don't see a problem with students doing it that way, but obviously they have much less engaged with the topic. That's also what we see. And we also realized ourselves when we do it, we're much less engaged with the topic.
But then looking from the other side, do you think we will still read papers?
No.
So then you could just, then you could just keep like very fixed structures on how to summarize and document the research, and then not even do the paper writing part. Yeah.
Exactly. So the paper, so basically, I do the. We have at the moment also a German project on national data research infrastructure, and basically one of the ideas is if I have documented everything, and I think Passant has written one paper on sort of the ubiquitous documentation. So imagine and just sort of take all your privacy worries away and go with me on this sort of idea. I have a student, he or she starts her master's thesis, she gets an empty machine, maybe a VM, and I say everything you do in this research project, you do on this VM. That's it. At the end of the thesis, she hands in the VM. This is my input to my large language model, and now I say, what did she find out? And then give me an abstract what she found out, and then, can you run me through how the experiment was done? And I get text. So basically I could keep that, and that would be the research outcome. And then 5 years later somebody says, oh, how does this one compare to the work the others did? And I get sort of a comparison. That's at the moment not possible. But sort of from an idea perspective, we could really see that the paper, which is, I think, if you go back, and I think that's what I really like, if you go back to Leibniz or before in computer science, a lot of publications were letters between people. And they were very specific to the other person. They were not for a general audience. And I think there were then later PhD theses on looking at these letters, making sort of, but it was very much, if I would, knowing you, and you would ask me about a project we do, and I write you an email about the project, this would be looking very different than writing it to, for example, Paul Lukowitz on the same, because I would basically, I know what you know from our lab, you know probably which people you know. I would really phrase this very differently than to another person. And I think this is sort of what I could imagine. That's why I think that it will be much earlier on communication. There we see it. Perhaps having this as one example is, so there are email clients that suggest you what you write. So I start writing an email and it says, oh, yeah, you want to write to Passant, here is the email I suggest you. Let's assume this, Passant asks me, do you come here for the tutorial? And I look at it and I say, oh yes. I press yes, and then the email client asks me, how long do you want the response? And then that exists. People have played with that. And then basically I say, oh, 2 sentences are fine. Then it translates my yes, taking the previous input plus how I usually, oh, this is so cool that you thought of me.
I'm checking all your emails.
So cool that you thought of me. I really love to do that. And is there food the day before? Then in the evening she cooks really nicely. So is there food before? That makes me calm. So that would basically probably my yes would. But knowing Passant is very busy, she would probably then get in her preview, Albrecht answered yes. And then she would say, oh, great. And then she says, oh, write something really nice back to him that he comes. And make it 3 paragraphs. And then I get these 3 paragraphs, and then I would just get, oh, Passant said something really nice that he comes. And then the question, and this is not future, that's existing. We can build that. And sort of you could also build this on just one side. I have some colleagues in the department who have, if I read their email, I feel they're passive-aggressive. And I was thinking if I should do a student project where I basically say, I can basically have a plugin for Outlook where emails from certain colleagues get translated in a friendly voice. And I think they would be probably surprised with the reply, because obviously it's not exactly what they wrote, but they would perhaps be educated, or they would be sort of, yeah. But I would not see if they are sort of passive-aggressive in the next email, or even active-aggressive, because I would put it through my friendly filter, and I would only see the friendly. And I think this is sort of, at communication, basically, we may go to basically a much shorter communication for a lot of things, like yes, no, because we don't, the niceties. At the same time, we lose a lot in our personal communication by not doing that. So, but let me move a little bit on. So you've understood this. Now we come to chain of thoughts and a few others. So basically the chain of thoughts is also one of those papers from OpenAI, which says, basically it's something like this. You have a one-shot model here. You have a question, Roger has 5 tennis balls, he buys 2 more, blah, blah, blah. And then the answer is 11. Then you put your new question in, which says the cafeteria had 23 apples. If they used 20 to make lunch and bought 6 more, how many apples they have? That's a wrong. That's also, in my view, a very wrong use of language models, because what does it predict? It predicts a number, and it's not calculating. So that's why I think people at the moment fuse like large language models with something like Wolfram Alpha, the math. You can basically easily fix this. But there's a nice thing, even something like this, what it's not made for, you can fix. So basically what you do here, chain of thought, you basically have this one example, and for the example answer, you create your thought process, you write it down, like Roger started with 5 balls, 2 cans, blah, and so on, and then you say the calculation, the answer is 11. And now basically if you then put this in, it does basically not give you just an answer, it does basically the same reasoning, and then more often than in this case, it comes up with the right answer. It works much better for textual things. It doesn't really work too well in my view for math. I think it's just the wrong application for math, but that's the example they had in the paper. So that's the idea, is basically you add explanations, and that's basically why it's called chain of thought. You explain how your thinking process was, and based on that thinking process, we go forward. And now you could basically automate this, and that's another paper, same group. They basically say, they have a question, and then they ask what would be sort of a reasonable chain of thoughts for that. And then basically once they have the chain of thought, then they ask the question again with that chain of thought. It's a bit like with the code, give me suggestions how to improve it. And once you have the suggestions how to improve it, you add this. And here it's basically, okay, so let's think step by step. This is basically give me the thought process, and then it gives you the thought process. Once you have this, you take this and copy it in there. And what they did in this paper, they just automated this. So basically, again, sort of very simple, and I would guess in the newer version, I guess already, because that was, I think, 22 that they had it in Roots, that they have already basically implemented it in the current 24 version.
If there's no statistics on how many iterations, for example, that I give to ChatGPT or the language models to adapt this answer for a certain question?
I think it's basically the longer the better, in a way. And there's obviously limits to it. I think if you paste whole books in there, it doesn't really work that well. That's where then fine-tuning comes in. But sort of, and it's hard to say. I think that's the other thing. Nothing is deterministic because it's the parameter space is so large, so it's not deterministic. Okay, then there is again sort of thorough shot. Basically, what we take is we take the chain of thoughts, which is COT, and basically we make this in there, and what we basically go from zero shot to few shot. Basically, you automatically look for examples, put them in, put the examples in, and you build that up. And at the moment, I think when you think of how you program it, that's an easy way. You basically ask sort of questions where you know answers or where you have similar ones, and then you put it together. And you can basically automate this, that you basically, you answer, you have things which are simple, you get answers for it, and you build it up in that space where you are, in basically in your domain, and this basically gives examples for that domain. And I think I speed now up, I'm nearly done. Prompting with knowledge. I think that's what I did at the beginning again. There is quite some stuff out there, prompting with knowledge. It's basically something very simple. You have basically text with knowledge on the topic, and you have your question, and you just put this into one prompt. And typically you put the knowledge first and the question last. And the interesting thing is this text has to be on the topic. It does not need to provide the answer, because the answer comes out of the big body. The knowledge just gets you in the right part of the model. And basically it steers you into the right direction. And so basically this is what you can do. You basically use a Wikipedia article and your question that will give you typically a better result than not using the Wikipedia article before, even so if the answer is not in the Wikipedia article. And there is sort of, again, sort of some work on that. Basically, this knowledge generation can be done automatically. So basically, you have a question, you variate the question, generate knowledge, put that knowledge in, and that can come out of a database, but it can also come out of another large language model. And then basically, you increase the size of your prompt to basically get away from this, I asked this random person in Tokyo, to having a conversation with that person. And I think this activity we skip, I just tell you what the activity would have been. So you basically pick a use case, you pick a tone, like language learning as use case, sports training, psychology will support, and as output tone, and there's a T missing, a magician, a football coach, a PhD supervisor, a kindergarten teacher. I guess the last two are very similar in a way. And then the output format could be like a tweet, like a JSON document, HTML document, Markdown, and so on. That's why I copied this in, because you would have gotten these things, but I think you can do it later with your own project. And now just to wrap it up, I think there is, for example, this human-centered design process for interactive systems, and basically a lot of those things in there you can speed up, like massively. That's at least our experience. But what we see is also especially in software engineering, there is a lot of variation how much people can speed it up. And our guess is how well people understand large language models is one, but also how well they can do the job. So typically, the most experienced people get it quicker. And that's a real tricky thing. So if you think of consulting, the junior consultant you can replace by a language model. The senior consultant you can't. So, but how does somebody become a senior consultant if they never are a junior consultant in the business? If you have basically the tester, you can replace. The junior developer, you can replace. But the senior developer and the architect, you cannot. But how do you become a junior developer if you have never been a tester? How do you basically become a senior developer if you have never written a lot of lines of code? And this is really a challenge we face in society, that basically the difficult positions remain. And I think we see this not just with large language model, we see it with driving. A car can drive now autonomously or automatically quite well in easy conditions, but as much as the conditions get more difficult, the systems fail. So I think this is sort of one of the general problem with AI. And I think there is sort of, we put an article together, and I think this is sort of the title page of the article. It was in the January magazine, Interactions magazine, it's open access, so we can also share it. It's basically the idea, how much user do I really need in user-centered research, or can I just basically simulate the user and go with that. And I think the final one, it's not just for basically grading text. We used it also for creating images, like here with Discord and Midjourney. What interface element should we use for a time tracking application for workplace? And we have created sort of, as you see here in the background, some of the screens. They are not good yet, but I think they're getting better from week to week. I think we looked into physical objects. I looked into sort of a display ring, also with Midjourney, how this could look like. And I think, especially for basically working with users in early iterations of, you get very quick with something. And this is sort of something I want to close with. So, what sensors should I use for a plant monitoring system? Include suggestions for specific sensors that work with Arduino. Again, sort of prototyping thing. It's basically comes the same. It comes out with roughly the same. So we do a course on sketching with hardware, and basically it's as good as our students after 2 hours school. And obviously you can also generate a code. And now the question, does this replace us? And I think apparently to replace programmers with robot, all basically clients will just have to accurately describe what they want, and then we're safe. I think this is sort of one of those things, if you don't know what you want, if you cannot describe, and this comes back to specification being very explicit what you want. If you can do that, and whether you do it then in Python, in C++, or in natural language, is still a skill most people don't have. So this requirements engineering side is, in my view, sticking around. And remember, that's how the browser looked in 1993 and 1994. That was when I started studying. I went, in one night, we went through all of Yahoo. It was funny. And already there were sort of dark corners of the internet. But I think this is sort of, at that point, a lot of people said, that's never really catching on. It's so awkward to use. Those pictures are half of the time not loading. The pages are not. And I think that's where we are with large language models. And my feel is the speed is faster. I would guess that most of the World Wide Web as we use it now is by the end of this decade obsolete. And I think with this, I leave the recommendations open here. So I think just take the first one. It's only safe to use when you can check the outcome. I think that's something you would really take this in, because there's just no way to know whether it's right. I think there will be new tools which basically give you a reference, and then you can even know that lowers the bar for knowing that it's right. Basically, if I get an answer and I get a reference. So let's say I asked ChatGPT how long is Aldi open. It's in the supermarket here, and it says it's open till 8 o'clock. This is Munich. Here it's probably 10 o'clock, hopefully. And then it gives me a link to a web page where it says. And probably most of the time I will not check the web page because I don't care, like we don't check references in papers, but I can. And I think this is something, this first thing is not something absolute. It's something basically, can I check if the outcome is right? And so basically if it gives me an answer, and I can basically, if I have a, let's say I have an equation, and I get an answer, I can check is it right? That saves me the time of calculating. Can I check if I can check a reference? Can I check if it's right? So it's not something that's stable. And the final one within research and also within basically work, be transparent where you use it. It's a bit like using related work. It's a good thing to use it. I think people will value that you can use it, but be transparent and don't give it out as your own work. Because I said earlier, you cannot check it now whether you have plagiarized ChatGPT, but OpenAI can do it, and that may be another business model for them that you can check text who generated and when. And with this, I'm done. Sorry that I ran a bit over, and yeah, if you have questions, talk to me. I have to leave for Brussels in roughly an hour or so, but I'm still around over lunch.
Questions? Thoughts? Again, from the non-IT expert. So now you're saying like ChatGPT or AI cannot replace like the senior software engineer and architect and so on. So using this model or thought, you also meant like we only have to use it if we know the results. But for instance, some people are using ChatGPT to learn a language or to learn something. So if I ask GPT as a non-expert, like tell me, can you teach me the basics of HTML? How can I program it? So he will give me an answer if I'm trying to learn something that I obviously have no clue about it.
But you can check it. You can check it. So the HTML one and the programming one is a good one because we recommend students to do it. So basically, you make an HTML page, and what can you do? You basically take the HTML, save it, put it in a browser, and as it looks, if you want, basically it engages you with the topic. It gives you results. And you can look whether it looks like what you wanted, you know?
Yes, but that's some, like, if I'm really zero knowledge about programming, even HTML, C++, everything. Yeah. And then I go to ChatGPT and I ask him, can you tell me, how can I introduce myself? Like, the very basic knowledge about computer science.
But
if I ask him, like, yeah, it's the same, like, for architecture. If I go to him and ask him, like, can you teach me the basics of architecture?
I think those things will work extremely well because 1 million people have written about them.
Yeah, but
and it basically it will work because you will basically once you look at it, it will make sense, even the very basics. I think that's something when you start, you will basically catch up. And I think we know it now with students learning to program. I think you will ask sort of, I have never programmed, what programming language? And then it says, use yeah, let's say, then probably says use Python to try it out. And then, how can I use it? And it says, go onto Google Colab and open the page. Then you ask, how can I go onto Google Colab to do that? So I think we have done this. And then you can do the steps. And at some point it may not work. But you see basically you see the outcome. You have a chance to get the outcome. At these processes, when you learn, you're in a dialogue. And obviously sort of, you're not just learning with ChatGPT. You're basically typically then trying stuff out. I think with language learning, it's also, I think the translation thing is very much solved in a way, in my view. I think that's, if you look at DeepL, that's, I think, for most of the big languages, it's fairly easy. For the smaller languages, it's more tricky. But I think the learning is very often you engage with something. And if you look at how much wrong things you learned in school and how much errors are in school books, we're okay because we live with basically having non-perfect knowledge on learning. But I think it's really this, very often you go step by step and you can basically create stuff you can check. And I show you one short thing.
So I can ask him to teach me a course from MIT per se, like something like that?
Yes.
Okay.
But I think you don't have to do it from MIT. You can basically teach me about, so you can basically say, teach me about prompting or something like this, and then it will work. I'll show you quickly something which we did with students. So I showed a more fun thing. So I made a screenshot of this web page and says, can you generate me the code?
We cannot see something.
Okay, sorry. Okay, I made a screenshot of this web page, which is a banking web page. And then I said here, can you create a basic HTML file and a CSS file to make a prototype of a similar page? Now it generates the HTML and the CSS. And now I just have to say, and now if I don't know it, it basically even says what I have to do with it, where I have to store it, and then obviously it generated a similar one, but I wanted to do perhaps a phishing attack, so I wanted to have it look more similar. So I go a bit more into it, and then it gets closer to the website, and then we get there. And then there's more in there. And now this is the more easy one, I think. So can you create an HTML CSS for this page? And then basically, okay, it takes the HTML and the Google. And then I say, and here you even see I have no idea that it's called JSON, so that's also something. I have a service that provides a set of answers in JSON. It's spelled differently, and then I say, and then it says, oh yeah, look, this looks like it's JSON. So when it looks like this, it gives me another page, and it says do these things, and here is the example of how this looks like. And I think you can iteratively learn. And the nice thing is, how can I display the HTML page, you ask, and then it says, oh, just save it on your computer, and then say, oh, I have a Mac, or I'm on a mobile phone, how can I do it? And then it will, I think that's what I mean with checking. You have to basically if you generate something, you have to believe it. That's hard. But if you can do something with it, it works.
Okay.
So you can use that for the hackathon to generate your solutions.
So it doesn't work perfectly, but it's speeding up sort of the time to. This is sort of, that's why I left it out. That requires GPT-4, where you can put the images in order to basically have the multimodal stuff. But I think I keep
in the hackathon we don't have a limitation on the version of ChatGPT that you can use. So if any of you is having a private ChatGPT-4 account, feel free to use it. Our assumption is that the majority are using the free account 3.5.
Okay. And also you can generate a code with 3.5. I think that's not. I think it's just sort of the code usually does not work out of the box. It needs some tweaking. But the tweaking is much faster if you know what you do than writing it from scratch. Okay, I think I keep people from lunch. Sorry.